Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
We'll discuss the Louisiana economic outlook when Dr. Loren Scott joins us on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Pleased to be joined by Dr. Loren Scott. We're going to talk about the U.S. economy, Louisiana's economy, and the Louisiana economic outlook. Buddy, welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Tim.
Glad you are. Let's start with an overview, your analysis of the current state of the U.S. economy.
Well, the good news is there's no recession out there right now. That's really good. We haven't had a recession since the Great Recession, but the bad news is the recovery has been really lethargic. This has been the slowest recovery we've had since 1961. Actually, if you went back a little further, it was even slower than those. To give you an idea of all the recessions we've been through since 1961, the average growth rate, real gross domestic product, was about 22.2% in the first 5 years. This has been 11.1. It's been really slow.
Basically half the growth.
Basically half the growth. It's been very lethargic. And as it turns out, looking forward, you look at all the forecasts out there. Most people are saying, yes, it's going to be more of the same. They really don't see any change going forward to 2.1% growth rate. Right now, they're not forecasting any recession anytime over the next 2 years.
So just continued slow growth. Now, obviously, as we sit here and tape, we're just a few days away from the presidential election. Crystal ball time. What does the economy look under a President Hillary Clinton, and what might it look like under a President Donald Trump?
Well, under Hillary Clinton, my impression is that she wants to continue the same thing that President Obama did, in which case we should expect the same thing. We should expect continued low growth. We should expect more taxes. And more taxes. If you had principles of economics, one of the things we learned about taxes is they raise the cost curves upward, cause people to produce less and to hire fewer people. So that's what we can expect there. Under Trump, I'm not really sure. I'm not really quite sure. Although
I'm not sure anyone is.
No, I'm not really. But I'm really concerned about his attitude about free trade. If he goes in and torpedoes the North American Free Trade Agreement, then all the numbers are going to turn red very fast. If you look at the North American Free Trade Agreement, when that occurred in 1992, we lost our largest manufacturing employer in the state. We lost fruit of the loom, 12,000 people, but also the lowest wage industry in manufacturing. On the other hand, we entered one of the best growth periods Louisiana's ever had. We picked up 330,000 jobs between 90 and 2000. Our per capita income grew 55%. It was just a great time period. When you have free trade agreements like this, you win some, you lose some, but on the net, all countries win. That's what we learned in Principles of Economics class.
But isn't that something that most politicians do, right? They'll focus on the jobs that are lost, even though some of them may be these low-wage jobs, as you talked about. But you never hear them talking about the upside of free trade agreements, like the jobs that are created, the net increase to the economy overall. And that's something that concerns economists, isn't it?
Well, it concerns economists because there's not a whole lot of things that economists are on almost 100% agreement on. And one of the things is free trade is good for everybody. Everybody ends up winning, although there are winners and there are losers within each country. And that's because of something we learned in Principles of Economics called the law of comparative advantage. And the law of comparative advantage basically says when you raise barriers to trade between countries, all countries lose. As a matter of fact, an excellent example of this is what happened during the Great Depression, 1929 to 1935. One of the primary reasons for that is we got involved in a trade war. We passed the Smoot-Hartley Act, said we're going to protect our domestic industries. And when we did that, boom, they raised their tariffs, we raised our tariffs, they raised their tariffs, we raised our tariffs, and boy, we lost 2/3 of our international trade dollars. And you can't do that without sending your economy in the tank.
Well, that uncertainty is another thing, obviously, that concerns business people globally. And while it makes for a good talking point, I think, in a campaign to say we're going to bring back those jobs and we're going to stop losing our jobs and we're going to start winning again, which is what Trump is fond of saying, when you get into the subtleties, it's a little bit more nuanced than just some jobs have left and we're going to bring those back.
Yeah, on international trade, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's almost no agreement among economists on this. So, but it's going to be an interesting time because honestly, I'm having trouble grasping exactly where Trump is going to go from this point out. It's a very strange election. I think everybody agree on that.
Let's turn our attention away from politics
okay.
and over to the oil industry, the oil and gas industry in Louisiana. Oil, as we tape, is a little above $50 a barrel, I think. This industry's just taken a beating in this state over the last 18 to 24 months. What's your overall outlook for energy, for oil and gas in Louisiana?
In Louisiana, I think it's going to be a little tough. It's going to be really tough, especially in the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico is very important to the Houma Lafayette area. They just thrive off of what's going on in the Gulf. And the problem is that before all this happened back in 2014, the break-even point in the Gulf of Mexico was $70 to $80 a barrel. Well, the companies out there like Chevron have worked with their suppliers like Schlumberger and Baker Hughes, Edison Schwest, the supply boat people, Tidewaters. And they said, look, guys, if we're going to operate the Gulf of Mexico, we can't keep having these prices. You're going to have to give us a break on prices. And so what they've done is they got the price down to 55 to 60. Well, we're not at 55 to 60. In today's Wall Street Journal, we were at 48. And so we really kind of see it being at least the latter part of 2017, 2018, before you start seeing things starting to ramp up in the Gulf. The Gulf at one point had 56 active rigs, now we have 16. And in addition to that, at the very same time the industry is having this problem, the federal government has come along and said as a result of Macondo, the oil spill, we're going to lay all these new rules on you for safety purposes, and those rules, one of the things they do is they increase cost, which is a problem on that 55 to 60 stage. And so it's really, we're not very optimistic about the next couple of years for the Gulf of Mexico.
We'll talk about the next couple of years because even if you think about, the onshore production, places like the Haynesville Shale where the rig count has gone to basically nothing. We've got about a minute left here in this segment. Where do you see the price of oil going, say, over the next 18 to 24 months?
Well, right now we think we're going to average about 42 this year, go to 53 next year, and then average 60 in 2018.
But we're just getting to the break-even point.
We're just now getting to the break-even point even with that, and I got to tell you, the problem here is in the United States, we're smart. This industry is run by really smart people. And our problem right now in the United States is the Permian Basin. The Permian Basin is just a great place to go and drill for oil, and they got the break-even point there down to 35. And so every time the price goes up, they put more and more rigs out there. They put more and more rigs out there. Guess what happens to the supply? You get more supply, and that puts the pressure, downward pressure on price. So it's very tricky right now.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. I want to talk about the Louisiana Economic Outlook, which is a great report that you produce annually. We're visiting with Dr. Loren Scott, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
What if I said that the American dream is alive and well, and that it exists for anyone willing to build it? That the power of a nation does not reside in its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of those who built them, and that the country's greatest heroes also wear hard hats. In today's America, it's not enough to dream about the future. You have to build it. Build your future at byf.org.
For more than 25 years, the TJC Group has been helping industry communicate and build relationships with communities, elected officials, and governmental agencies. We are the leading firm in the U.S. for the development, management, and facilitation of industry-based community advisory panels.
Whether you're building a new facility or you manage an existing business, let us put our community and governmental relations experience to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Spadel's Florist was founded over 30 years ago. From my mom's kitchen, we have grown into one of the largest florists in this area. There's a sense in our community that you stick together. Good times or bad, and oil and gas is part of that family. They're my neighbors, they're my customers, they're the person I'm sitting next to at church. If oil and gas is doing well, all of our businesses are doing well. We are Louisiana Oil and Gas.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Our guest is Dr. Loren Scott. Loren, you talked about regulation and its impact on the energy industry. In Louisiana now, Governor Edwards has said, reached out to a number of the parishes and said, if you don't file suit against the major oil companies to get them to fund this coastal rebuild, that we're going to step in, the state is going to step in and sue for you. This industry is going through a terrible time. We're going to take lawsuits now and hit them when they're down. My perspective on this is if we can show that in violation of its permit, an oil company has caused specific damage to our coast, then they ought to be held accountable and they should be made to pay to rebuild that. But just to go out and sue this industry because they're the deep pockets, when we invited them to come here, we permitted their activity, and now we're going to say, even though all of that took place, and we have loved your tax dollars, by the way, now we're going to hit you when you're down. What's your perspective on that?
No, I totally agree with you. I think if a company under existing rules and regulations violated those rules and regulations, they should be held accountable. I mean, that's what rules and regulations are for, to do that. But some of these suits, I mean, just to do this because they have deep pockets, I got to tell you, they don't have real deep pockets right now. You can't just look at the total profits that they earn and say that's a really big number. You got to look at the total profit they earn relative to their investment, how much is invested in those companies. You got to look at the rate of return on equity, and they are really sucking wind right now. And it's kind of interesting to me that Lafourche Parish, the Terrebonne Parish, said no. We're not going to do this. Yeah. This is our lifeblood. Are you insane?
But in those situations, the state is going to probably step in and sue on their behalf.
Yeah, well, I just got to tell you that you just need to understand that there are repercussions from that. I mean, because all it does is shift the cost curves upward. It increases uncertainty, and we're not the only place you can drill for oil now. You know, it used to be there's only like 4 states we could drill for oil. Now there's about 20, you know, and a lot of companies, as a matter of fact, have made the decision Look at the rig count in South Louisiana.
That's all you got to do.
South Louisiana, look at this South Louisiana rig count. I mean, they bamboozled. They said, look, if you're going to do this to us, we're going to the Permian Basin, we're going someplace where people don't do this to us.
Well, and particularly in this economy, has that industry lost 15 to 20,000 jobs over the last 2 years? What's the count in terms of employment? Because what we're really doing is we're not just going after these companies, we're going after these jobs and these careers and the way people earn their living in Louisiana.
Yeah, I mean, again, you got to, even if you feel like you're righteous in your decision about this, there are repercussions of your righteousness. And that is, you're going to cost even more jobs to the industry because, again, principles of economics, your regulations and suits shift the cost curves upward, which means that people do less work and employ fewer people. And boy, we're really feeling this down in the oil patch right now. We're feeling it in Houma and Lafayette. And I think that's one of the reasons places like Lafayette Parish, Lafourche, Terrebonne Parish, they're not going to touch this. They say, you got to be crazy. We're not going to do this to ourselves.
Well, and I know the Attorney General in Louisiana has said that he wants to fight against these suits, and so there's this disagreement between the governor and the Attorney General. It's going to be very interesting to see how all of this plays out. But in the meantime, people suffer. Jobs are lost, careers are lost, homes are lost, incomes are lost. And it really is a sad way to go, I think, go about doing your business when I think, and you give me your perspective on this, that the industry in general has been one of the parties at the table saying, what can we do to help here? Why don't we approach this as a team? Let's all be part of the solution rather than pointing the finger at you guys because you've got the deep pockets.
And I guess one of my jobs as an economist is just to point out the cost of doing this. I mean, you may think this is going to work out really good for Louisiana. I don't think, or well for Louisiana. It's really not going to work out well for Louisiana at all. We're going to lose too much in taxes. We're going to lose too much in jobs.
Too many times.
Too much in income. It's just not going to work.
Too many times this state has gone after the short-term reward rather than the long-term economic development. Let's shift gears one more time. Under either one of these two presidential candidates, we talked about this in the first segment a little bit, do you see any sort of coherent national energy policy being passed in the near future?
Well, I'm probably an outlier on this, but I hope before God there's not one. I mean, I've been an economist for a long time. I've been practicing economist since the 70s, early 70s, actually the late 60s. People are doing the math now and learning very bad things about my age. But anyway, I mean, I've never seen an energy policy come out of the federal government that turned out to be good for the industry or good for the country. I really think the best thing the federal government can do is get the heck out of the way and leave us the heck alone. I mean, you look at what we're doing now. We're putting all this energy and all these subsidies into wind and solar, which are way more expensive, take up way more land, way more
BTU,
unpredictable
right?
than natural gas, you know, and oil for that matter. And yet we're doing that because it's a national energy policy. Well, I think we're going to be way better off if the federal government stays the heck out of it and leaves it alone. If anything, one of the things they could do is open up areas of the country where we can't explore right now and open that up for drilling, like the East Coast, the West Coast, the eastern coast of the eastern area of the Gulf of Mexico, which are, I think we're the only country in the world right now. We have an energy policy, national energy policy, where you can't drill off the West Coast or the East Coast or the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. We're the only country in the world, I think, that knows where there's oil and gas and prohibit drilling.
And we won't go after it. And the sad part of that is you talk about the industry and how efficient it has become. The industry has proven that it can do this drilling in a very environmentally responsible way, and yet we still won't allow it.
And if they don't drill in an environmentally permissible way, then they should bear the consequences of that. You and I both agree on that. But I think for example, in the fracking area, the Obama administration spent years and years and years trying to show that fracking impacted drinking water. And they ended up finding, the Obama administration, you have to say, you know, as much as we hate fracking, we can't say it really does that.
Can't find
you
that
really
damage,
can't do that because they've been very, very careful about this.
Let's take a break. We come back. I want to go around the state, talk about the various regions and the economic outlook over the next couple of years for each of those areas. We're visiting with Dr. Loren Scott, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value? What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools? And that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you? Build your future at byf.org.
Keene Miller traces its roots to the dawn of the petrochemical industry in Louisiana. As the legal needs of the sector grew, our firm emerged as a leader in environmental law, economic development, real estate, employment, utilities regulations, and more. Today, these same clients and those new to our state continue to rely upon the firm and its attorneys for creative ideas, practical advice, and Louisiana know-how. Industrial strength law. Learn more at keenemiller.com.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Dr. Loren Scott, noted economist, is our guest. Dr. Scott, we talk about incentives driving behavior, right? And one of the very successful long-term incentives in this state has been for industry, the 10-year industrial property tax exemption. The current administration is starting to fool around with it a little bit. They've recommended some changes. They're putting some changes in place. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I just don't understand it. This has zero impact on the state budget, so why do this? I mean, you have something that's very, very successful, and you're starting to muck with it. Now, in the past, maybe there wouldn't be a whole lot at stake, but if you look at the Louisiana Economic Outlook, we document this, there's about $75 billion in projects, with a B, that are at what we call the feed stage, front-end engineering design. They have not started to build these plants. They're just looking
they can go somewhere else if they chose to.
That's exactly right. And what we've done with this is down in the bowels of each one of these companies, there's an accountant figuring out the rate of return on equity. And what we just did with these changes is we moved that needle away from us and towards Texas. Right. And we're always in a battle with Texas. So I don't get it. I mean, I don't think it's a good thing to do. And it has no impact on the state budget. I don't get it. And I tell you, I don't think I've found maybe one economic developer across the state, and I've run into a lot of them as we've gone across the state doing our little road show on the Louisiana Economic Outlook. I haven't found us. All of them are worried. Said, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
You know, this is
probably not the word they use, but you were on TV. So
I'm on television.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's shift our thoughts, and we'll watch what happens, obviously, over the course of the next few months with the 10-year industrial property exemption program. But let's shift our focus onto the Louisiana Economic Outlook. You do this every year. Talk for 15 or 20 seconds about the methodology, and then let's look at the state as a whole and the outlook.
Okay. Well, the main methodology we use is we are constantly during the year gathering data from all different kinds of sources about what's going on in the economy, what's happening in the oil industry, what's happening in the national economy. And then in August, I make probably 200 phone calls around the state talking to economic developers and chambers of commerce.
Business people
like the head of Edison Schwest people, Bollinger people, all these folks are very nice about talking to me about what's going on out there. Are you seeing downturns, upturns, you're gonna hire more, lay people off, et cetera. And so we use that information along with some statistical tools we use to do some forecasts for what's going on in each of the 9 metropolitan areas of the state.
So big picture from the state as a whole, over the next 18 months or so, what's the outlook?
Well, the state has been in a recession since, from an employment standpoint, since August of 15. And we think, unfortunately, that's going to continue through this year.
Driven mostly by oil and gas?
Mainly what's going on in the oil patch. What you see going on in the oil patch, Lafayette, Houma, and Shreveport, as it turns out, are all losing jobs. And they're losing at a pretty salty rate right now, especially Lafayette and Houma. And so, unfortunately, we think that's going to keep on because of what we mentioned before about the Gulf of Mexico. We think it's going to keep on into 17. 17 be kind of flat, and then finally in 18, if we're correct about our $60 oil price forecast, then we think we'll start to see some good growth.
You get back toward that break even.
Yeah,
so if you look at the state as a whole, maybe Baton Rouge and Lake Charles are the only two regions that have a positive outlook. Give me your thought on that.
For the most part, but the thing about them is
short term.
They're not just good, they're really good. I mean, Baton Rouge and Lake Charles are among the top 10 fastest growing metropolitan areas of the state. We've had this tremendous increase in industrial announcements that are mainly focused from Baton Rouge down to just the western edge of New Orleans along the Mississippi River, and then over in Lake Charles along the Calcasieu Ship Channel and the Sabine Pass. They're just, matter of fact, Lake Charles has like $96 billion in projects announced there. Some of them are already underway. So they're just doing great. I'm having a very great time. And then when you come to the middle part of the state, or sort of, when you go to Monroe, when you go to Alexandria, when you go to Hammond, there's not a whole lot going on there one way or the other. They're kind of flat. And then in New Orleans, you have some really good industrial expansions, but you have the drag down of the oil patch. So New Orleans is kind of flat too. And so it really depends on where you live. Remember what we used to say as kids was a limerick. When she was good, she was really, really good. When she was bad, she was horrid. We have some areas that are horrid. We have some places that are really, really good.
Well, if you think about the Acadiana area and the impact that the oil industry and the downturn has had there, it's been really significant. And we talked about the number of jobs. But then we go back and we look at this industrial expansion in both Baton Rouge and Lake Charles. And as you mentioned, two of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country from an economic perspective. But go back to what we talked about at the beginning of this segment. A lot of those projects have not come out of the ground yet. This 10-year industrial property tax exemption, in part why they have decided to make announcements in Louisiana because of the incentive package. And that could have a significant impact going forward.
Well, I think it could, except for one thing. I got to be straight about this. If you take the $135 billion in announcements, about 60 of them are actually underway and under construction. And also, if these announcements were made before June 24th of this year, they are under the old rules.
They're grandfathered in.
They are grandfathered in. They're the rule. Thank goodness for that. They were not under the old rules when it comes to business taxes. And in the last 12 months, we have levied a ton of taxes on businesses. We've made the decision, we have a state budget problem, and we've made the decision we need to split the burden between business and individual citizens. Which is, I understand that fairness argument, but you also need to understand the accountant down in the bowels of each one of these companies. When we raise those taxes, we move that needle away from us and towards Texas. And that was not grandfathered in.
And that we'll have to watch for as well. 10 seconds, if folks want a copy of the Louisiana Economic Outlook, what do?
They call the Economics Department at LSU, 578-5211.
That's right.
Code
and you
225,
can probably
you get a
go
copy.
online and find it as well.
Right? You can go online and find it there too.
Dr. Loren Scott, I always appreciate it. And always learn something when I have you on the show.
Me too. It's been a lot of fun.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.